You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Matt Reynolds. I'm here with Nikki Sims. I'm standing up today.
Hello.
I feel like standing.
Yeah. Serious.
Yeah. Well, I sit too much. I got a standing desk for a reason. Yeah. Might as well raise it.
Yeah.
We want to talk today a little bit about, coming to terms with cardio. Cardio is kind of a weird word, and we're going to go into it. Probably not the best word for how we use it. But I know you and I come from completely different backgrounds. And so I think that's going to be really good for the show because I came from the background of, I was really interested young, like in high school, with weightlifting, with bodybuilders, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, with, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and then got into powerlifting and was always attracted to the lifting game, which means that I was never attracted to the cardio game. Now, there was a time in my life when I competed, actually probably the time I would look back and say I was in the best shape of my life and kind of overall strong and healthy, when I was a competitive strongman, where you really combined the best of both worlds. Strongman is sort of like on another level. Powerlifting and CrossFit, way up here, right? And so I want to talk a little bit today about both. If you come from a background like mine, where you have gotten into this from like lifting, from this sort of process of, I just want to get started on getting strong. When should I do cardio? Should I bring it in? Like, that's not really your background. Your background is completely different. How did you get started, and what are you seeing out of our primary female audience?
Yeah, I was definitely a gym rat in the sense of going to the gym and doing all the classes, all the cardio classes. Like, this all started when I was in high school. I did some sports and I was terrible at the sports that I did. They recruited me onto the basketball team because they're like, you're tall, you'll be useful. And they were so wrong. Like, I'm so slow. And then I did cross country for one day. They're like, here's what you do in cross country. You run for lots of miles. Right. And I think I ran for a mile and a half and I was like, I'm done.
Went and smoked a cigarette.
Walked back to the locker room and never came back. But I loved being physical. So I joined a gym near my house and I would go there every day. Sunday mornings were my favorite day to go. I would be at the gym for 4 hours. It would start with a step class, and then I would go do cardio for 30 minutes before an ab class, and then I would go do cardio again, and then there was a yoga class, and I was just there all morning, and I loved it. But yeah, it was just what machines can I do? And I did the cardio machines, and then I would do some of the free weight machines, but I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. But that's what I was doing before I found out about CrossFit, which was, another way to do cardio.
Yeah, but it added in
and then they
with some barbells.
Trick you into barbells. Right. Yeah.
And then you were like,
which was great.
I'm done with the cardio. I would just like to do the barbells.
I was like, I can just do power cleans and pull-ups.
Right.
Yes, please.
Right.
And interestingly, we have this channel on Discord. It's called Strong Females. And I got really curious about everybody's background, why they started. And so I asked everybody what got them into lifting. And so many backgrounds were really similar. It's I used to do a bunch of cardio. There were a few other women who got started because of CrossFit. But it's we had this idea, maybe it was because we grew up with a bunch of magazines with a lot of ladies where a thigh gap was the most important thing. And we're we can only have a thigh gap if we do 6 hours of cardio a day.
Gross.
But that's how so many other women who train with us started. They thought they had to do everything with cardio, and then they learned about lifting. And then now we're lifters, and it's really satisfying.
And so then you come back, now we've come full circle, and we're asking the question, okay, now that we're lifting, now that we lift, now that we're focused on experiencing strength, what role should cardio play?
Yeah, and it does have an important place.
Absolutely
and I know
does.
You've actually done a lot of research on this. You wrote an amazing article on the Prowler and energy systems. So I'm excited to chat with you about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. And then when I taught college for a couple years, and it was always freshman, it was incoming freshman, sophomore, exercise science type majors. And so it was early physiology, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, kinesiology, things like that. And in that physiology class, you have to learn how to explain this stuff to an 18-year-old kid who's got zero background in it. And so,
Mhm.
I didn't do that very well in the beginning, but when you're able to teach a semester class, then you're able to teach it over and over and over again several times and kind of refine that. So I think I've got a pretty good way to take something that's really fairly complicated at the cellular level, and for the most part, just make it as simple as we possibly can. And let me be clear, I've said this before in other podcasts that I've done where I talk about this stuff. This is not made for physiologists, right? So there are going to be things I say today that if you're an actual doctor, PhD, you're going to be like, oh God, he's like way oversimplifying things. But that's not who the audience is for. The audience is like, what?
Strongman science.
That's right. What is this for? And it's legit science. It's not just bro science, but it's legit. So let's start with, people use the word cardio, and it's not a great word, but it comes from that word cardiovascular fitness, right? So it's that idea of heart and blood vessel, blood pumping fitness. What does that mean? How's that defined? Well, we can go into some of that, but it's not a great term, but it's the term that's used, right?
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to go to the gym and do arms. I'm going to do back.
Right. I still, by the way,
cardio.
I'll still have clients. I don't know if you do as well. Actually, I had them when I was in-person coaching as well at Strong, but online. We don't have leg day, arm day, back day at Barbell Logic. We have squat day, deadlift day, upper lower day, maybe, whatever. And I'll still have clients be like, hey, I need you to push my leg day back to tomorrow. I'd be like, oh, there isn't a leg day. We don't do that. And what they mean is the squat and deadlift day, right? So this is kind of one of those things. We can be a little more particular about the verbiage, but that's the word that people use. It's like online coaching. We're not crazy about the term online coaching in the industry, because most people are like, oh yeah, I'm an online coach, or I pay for online coaching. They mean like, oh, I pay for a template that somebody gives me on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really coaching. That's a program, right? And so we can be crazy and pedantic, but I think everybody knows what we mean when we say cardio. We're talking about what we would call energy systems training, right? Where we train and utilize the body's energy, right? And so another overarching term that I think is probably a more valuable term than cardio is conditioning.
Yeah.
But conditioning is more focused, or should be more focused, or more dependent on performance. So the conditioning that I need, or the condition I need to be in to be a competitive power lifter, is dramatically different than the condition you need to be in to be a competitive Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter, or the condition you would need to be in to run a marathon, right?
Right.
And for us, we've actually taken that word conditioning and we have also applied it to health. So we have to be careful in online coaching. We can't guarantee you, we can't make claims like, we know if you come to Barbell Logic, this is going to make you more healthy, right? But we certainly can look at health metrics, and we can do conditioning that the goal is to improve health metrics, to improve blood pressure, blood sugar, resting heart rate, the amount of calories you burn in a session of exercise, like density, different things like that, heart rate, different heart rate variabilities, or how often we are in zone 2 versus like really, really high, our heart rate's above 160. So we can do conditioning even if we're not a competitor in BJJ or powerlifting or marathons. If we're not competitive in anything, we're just trying to be conditioned to live a healthy lifestyle, to improve our quality of life. So I think that's an okay word to use, as long as we understand why we're using it.
It seems to me like cardio equals the activity that people will do to burn fat because they want to lose body fat, or because they ate too much last weekend. Now they want to burn that fat. Cardio is like the guilt.
Well, I like
exercising.
That is true. That's culturally, that's for sure true about that word.
Yeah. So to me, that seems like cardio is when you're trying to pull yourself out of a caloric surplus.
Yep.
Which there are plenty of studies that will show you like, well, is cardio the same as training and building muscle for digging yourself out of that caloric exchange? Maybe not.
Right.
But conditioning, that seems to me like the phrase that you'll get to when you start digging into the why behind people's reasons for asking you to do more cardio.
Yeah. Literally, it's training cardio. When you just use the word cardio and you're like, oh, it's because I'm guilty and I ate an extra brownie last night, so I've got to go to the gym and do cardio, i.e. I've got to do an extra 45 minutes on the treadmill. That's not what we're talking about.
You watch the calories go up. You're like, I know that brownie was 300 calories, so I'm going to
until I burn 300 calories on the treadmill, because, the treadmill calorie counter is extremely accurate.
Oh, absolutely.
So no matter what you are. I think when we use the word conditioning, there's probably a paradigm, a mental shift that occurs where when you say the word conditioning, you're really talking about training cardio. And so when we talk about that, we're talking about the different types of energy systems that the body, again, can gather energy, use energy, store energy. So if something crazy happened, I think I used the example in the article, like a rabid skunk comes in the office right now and starts spraying the office full of skunk butt, I'm going to take off running. I need enough stored energy. I need enough conditioning right now to get away from that skunk. I at least have to be faster than everyone else in my family so that someone else gets sprayed or mauled by the bear or whatever, right? Okay, so yeah, I think that's defining those terms, I think, are important. Now, I want to dive into some of the science behind energy systems, but before I do, I want to come back to what you said about when people talk about cardio, they are often talking about, this is the thing I do, this sort of extra exercise I do to help burn calories to lose weight.
Yes.
There are really, in my opinion, there are three primary reasons that you would do quote unquote cardio. Air quotes, which you can see on YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube. Cardio. Well, number one is you can do it for weight loss, for calorie expenditure. Cardio is not a great way to do that. It is a way to do it, but if your primary goal is to lose body fat or to lose weight, that is going to be far more impacted by your nutrition than by your cardio.
Yeah, I'm kicking myself for not having looked this up, but there was a study that came out not too long ago that said you would have to do, I think it was like 120 minutes of moderate, not slow steady, like moderate cardio, something crazy, like 60 to 120 minutes of moderate cardio 7 days a week to lose like 3 pounds in over 3 months.
That's right.
Something that requires a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, a lot of consistency for very minimal payoff.
That's right. Yeah, I've thought about before, and I've talked about this in the past couple of podcasts, like I've dramatically cut back on the alcohol that I'm drinking right now. And sometimes it comes back to that caloric efficiency, the caloric load. I could take a shot of whiskey and literally go boom, and in half a second, that was 120 calories.
Yeah.
How long do I have to perform cardio before I burn that 120 calories? Like it's a long time. And so having control over your nutrition is going to have a far greater impact on weight loss and body fat loss than cardio is. Right now, it doesn't mean that it won't have a positive impact. I think that cardio can have a positive impact on that, but it is not at all the primary way that we would do that. So then the question is, if that's not why we're doing cardio, then why would we be doing cardio? And that comes down to one of the two other reasons, 3 total reasons. Reason 2 would be for performance. So again, if there's something you're trying to perform in, especially a sport, if you play any sport whatsoever, men's basketball league, BJJ, powerlifting, strength lifting, marathons, Spartan races, whatever, there is a level of conditioning of what the old powerlifters used to call preparedness, general physical preparedness, which I think they stole from the Russians. They would just say, like, this is the level of conditioning I need to have to be able to perform at my sport or what I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah, this reminds me of times when a client will like come back from a weekend trip and they'll be like, oh, I went hiking and I was so out of breath the entire time. Or I just randomly decided to run a 5K and I was so out of breath, I'm out of shape. And I think that anytime you do cardio, you become out of breath. It's kind of a shock when you do something cardiovascular, having not done it for a while, and you instantly think, I am out of shape.
Right. Whatever that means.
And it's like, yeah, whatever that means.
Yep.
And so it's like your preference for feeling in shape when you're doing activities that require like heavy breathing.
Yep.
Your general physical preparedness.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the third one is, and this would be the one that I think probably should resonate with just about everybody listening, even if you utilize one of the first 2 reasons, and that's for general cardiovascular health. It's energy systems efficiency. It's your body's ability to have a strong, healthy heart, vascular, blood pumping, lung, respiratory system. Like all of that system works together. I want that to be as healthy as possible in my body because, again, we're training our bodies to experience strength for the improvement of quality of life. If all I do is sit around and eat potato chips and eat tons of calories just to hit a PR on the lifts, my argument would be for almost everybody, that's not going to improve quality of life. I mean, maybe for the one person that's going after the world record powerlifting total, right? But for most of us, we want a combination of strength and health, strength and cardiovascular fitness. We want to be able to go out and hike, go on vacation to Colorado and hike up a mountain and be able to do it.
Enjoy it.
That's right. You certainly are going to breathe heavy, the air's thin and whatever, but you ought to be able to complete the task. That's the goal. You should be able to go out and mow your lawn. You should be able to go like whatever, play a pickup game of basketball or whatever those things are that you want to do.
Your heart's a muscle.
That's
and it
right.
needs to do that.
It's intimately connected with the respiratory system, right? With your lungs and the amount of oxygen in your blood. So those are the three reasons. And my argument for almost everybody, especially those who are listening who are middle-aged and older, which is probably the vast majority of our audience and certainly the vast majority of people that we have at Barbell Logic, that we want to do some form of cardio in a way that is very effective and very efficient, so we don't have to waste a ton of time, in order to give us the greatest return on investment for improving cardiovascular fitness, right? And then for some people who are actually trying to prepare for something, and maybe, again, we've got a lot of military clients who are preparing for their PFT test, that would be conditioning for their physical fitness test, and that's different based on what branch of military you're in. Or if you've got I know for you, you have times of the year where you are actively going to like BJJ tournaments, and then times you're not going to BJJ tournaments. And for you, you'll play a little bit of that. You can push the weights and push the strength training and push the amount of total volume or total work you're doing in the weight room, because you don't have to be in the best shape of your life for a tournament. As you're going in to try to be in the best shape of your life for a tournament, you might have to pull back just a little bit on the stuff in the weight room. Not lift, but it's just a budget, right? It's about using that. So figuring out the most effective and efficient way to do that, I think, is key. And that's going to be very dependent on every single individual, your age, your ability, what your performance goals are, if it's just health. For those of you who naturally genetically have high blood pressure, who have high, blood lipid, like your LDL cholesterol is high, your triglycerides are high, some of those things are going to have, some people are going to have a better return on investment for this stuff than other people. It's the same with lifting. We can put in the same amount of work in lifting. Some people just get really, really strong, and some people have to fight and grind for every pound that they get. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's dive into the science, and I'm going to make this as simple as I possibly can. So when I taught my 18-year-old kids about this in college, I would say, your body has essentially like a pool or a reservoir of energy. And that energy, the scientific word for that energy is adenosine triphosphate, ATP, right? Adenosine and 3 phosphates is what it is. You don't have to know exactly what that means. You don't just understand that's the chemical name for energy. Any energy, for the energy that I have standing up to do this podcast, or energy you have sitting down to do the podcast, or energy we have to work out in our gyms, to eat food, even the very tiny amounts of energy it takes to sleep at night. There is we need to gather energy to like sleeping.
Being alive takes energy.
Being alive, breathing takes energy, right? Now, so there is this reservoir, and there are 3 primary forms of energy systems that we are able to put energy into that reservoir or take energy out of that reservoir. The first and simplest to understand is the aerobic energy system. Everybody's heard of this. This is not a great word, but aerobic just means with oxygen. Why do we run out of breath when we do quote unquote cardio? It's because when we do aerobic cardio, we're utilizing oxygen to literally oxidize fatty acids in our bodies in order to provide energy into that reservoir, right? It's the same way I've used the example before of like when you cut an avocado open, you're going to make guacamole. You let it sit there for a little bit. Like what macronutrient is avocado primarily made from?
Tasty, delicious fat.
Delicious fat. And it gets very brown, right? If you leave it out for very long. As a matter of fact, what we have to do is we actually have to add some form of acid. We add lime juice in order to stop the oxidation.
So there's a reaction that's being caused that demands oxygen.
Correct.
And we need more of that oxygen to continue making that reaction.
That's exactly right. And here's the key. The aerobic energy system is very low on power. It doesn't produce high power output, but it's very long in duration. How long? As long as you're alive. Because when you stop breathing, you're dead. And then the aerobic energy system doesn't work anymore. Okay, now, how much will it give me versus, how much or how little can it give? Well, that's where we can see the relationship between our heart rate and our breathing rate. So the more our heart rate is low and we're breathing slow and we don't have to take big, giant deep breaths like the way we would breathe at night when we're sleeping. We don't need much oxygen to sleep. We don't need much energy to sleep, but we still need some energy. And so our heart rate is very low and our breathing rate is very low. as we start to, I just finished a workout a little bit ago with my wife, and then we walked around the neighborhood at the end of our workout, and it was kind of like speed walk, power walk. My heart rate was around 125, 127, somewhere in there. So that's still aerobic and it's not high output, but I'm moving pretty good. I'm breathing fairly heavy. I can still talk. I'm not
yeah.
I'm not this, right? I can still have conversations with my wife, but the heart rate is up higher, which means I need more oxygen because I need it to help produce more energy. And the waste product, the quote unquote waste product, that is just CO2. I breathe in oxygen, I oxidize fatty acids in the cellular respiratory system, and I breathe out carbon dioxide. Very simple system, beautiful system that works wonderfully.
Like you have oxygen. What's the wood that's being burnt like to create that energy? Is it fat? Is it
fat and carbs? Okay. Yep. And as a matter of fact, interesting. So it's not just fat that oxidizes, it's not just fatty acids, but also sugars can. What happens when you cut an apple in half? It also turns brown, but it turns brown slower than the avocado does. Right? So it also oxidizes carbohydrates. So the oxidation of it's utilizing sugars and fats in order to produce energy. Now, the reason that the aerobic system became so popular in like the 80s was because when they understood that the aerobic system oxidized fat, then everybody's like, oh, it burns primarily fat, which is true. So we should do that to burn a bunch of fat. The problem is it doesn't really burn a lot of anything. It doesn't take a lot of energy. Like there's only so much it can actually do. You can only breathe in so much oxygen. You get to some point and you can't, when you talk about being out of breath, what that means is your body needs more oxygen to provide more energy than what you're able to breathe in and give it to use.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's when we have to kick over into another energy system. So the aerobic energy system is always working. And this is for like long, slow duration cardio, right? Walking around those healthy 10-minute walks, 15-minute walks, up to 45 minutes, right? Where you can kind of always have a conversation. Your heart rate is up in that sort of, again, some of that kind of zone 2, but it's in that 125 range, somewhere in that ballpark. 120 to 130 is a good spot for that. And again, it's going to be dependent upon your age, right? As people get older, their heart rate's going to be higher, right? So
yeah, I think our high rates are different than each other's too. I think 120 for me would be near death.
Oh, really? Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. So right. So it depends. It's completely dependent. One of the reasons I like to track with wearables, with like an Apple Watch or a Whoop or something like that, is that you can get those trends for yourself.
Yeah.
So instead of making that blanket statement, like 120 is where you need to be. Rachel's definitely in better cardiovascular shape than I am. The same walk we just did, she was at 142 and I was at like 125. And I'm like, that's weird that you're just so much higher than mine. And she's not like, she's just kind of normal for her. So we can get those trend lines. Okay. Now, so the aerobic energy system is the first primary energy system. It's being used at all times. It's being used whether we're sleeping, whether we're standing, whether we're walking. And it's being used if we're doing things more intense as well. But when we do something that's more intense, like a heavy set of 5 squats, like sprinting from the rabid skunk, like probably rolling in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the point where it's like, especially if there's rounds, right? Or MMA, it's called brutal, right? And you're like, I can't get enough. Then your body is maxing out its aerobic energy system. It's maxed, but it doesn't provide enough energy. So it needs some more energy from somewhere else. Where does it get it from? Well, there's 2 anaerobic places that your body gets energy from. Anaerobic is an even worse word than aerobic. Yeah, that just means without oxygen, but it doesn't say what it's with. The first type of energy system is the very high power output energy system, like what you use for a heavy set of 3 or a single or double or even a heavy set of 5, heavy weights, fast, hard sprints. We're talking about
high
effort, but very short duration.
Yeah.
Because you can't put out high effort for a long period of time. Where do you get that energy? So your body has about, and this is again a very blanketed statement, it's different for everybody, but about 7, 8, 9 seconds of stored high power energy, high output energy stored in that reservoir in your body. So that when the rabid skunk comes in, I have a 7, 8, 9 seconds of power output that I can do before my body has to start pulling from other places and making energy. I have a reserve of 7, 8, 9 seconds of energy there.
So if we relate this to running, like aerobic would be you're running a marathon, 5K, something like that. And this one, when we're in glycolytic, that's going to be...
Actually, we're not glycolytic yet. We're getting there.
We're in ATP.
We're going to get there next.
So this is
still
the
phosphagen
the
and
sprint.
similar.
It's like a 50-meter sprint.
Correct. 40-yard dash.
Yeah.
40-yard dash.
Okay.
Something like that. Okay.
Okay.
This is as high output as you can possibly
We're on
get.
very
Now,
opposite ends of the spectrum now. Okay,
that's
got
right.
it.
That's right.
Mhm.
That system is called the phosphagen system, ATP system, right? And sometimes it's called the ATP/creatine system. And so that is because we have stored ATP in our body. And then the reason that we take creatine for supplementation, the reason that creatine is so popular, is it's creatine phosphate. That's what it's called. And when energy is used out of that reservoir, it goes from adenosine triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate. It gives off a phosphate. It goes from 3 phosphates to 2. And that adenosine diphosphate's running around like as if it were speed dating, being like, boy, I sure do wish I had a phosphate I could mate with. That would be awesome. And creatine phosphate runs up, right, in its purple velvet hat and says, hey, here I am. And they hook up adenosine diphosphate and creatine phosphate, and they become ATP again. That's actually the first time I've ever used that, but you're going to remember
did your
it now.
18-year-olds?
No, but you're going to remember this now, right? So that's right. So ADP and creatine phosphate get together and they become adenosine triphosphate again really quick. What that does is that allows the person to store originally from 7 to 9 seconds of reserve energy to maybe up to 10, 11, 12 seconds of reserve energy. So you get like maybe an extra couple seconds of energy.
Yeah.
You're like, well, how big of a deal is that? Because a lot of people think not a big deal.
Big deal.
Big deal if you're getting chased by a bear.
Yeah.
Big deal if you're trying to hit a 5-rep max and you would have gotten just 4 reps and now you're going to get 5.
Yeah.
And you take creatine for 20 years and you get an extra rep on every work set for the rest of your life.
That's why it's worth it. Mm-hmm.
That's why it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
creatine isn't a pre-workout. It's not I have a higher heart rate and more energy. It's not Red Bull. It's
absolutely not.
It's another rep. That's exactly how to put it. It's the
it
ability to do another rep or 2.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to build up that reservoir of energy in your system or to convert some of that spent energy quickly back into energy. So that's it. Now, even in the best of scenarios where I'm supplementing with creatine and I'm doing what I need to do and I need high power output, again, sprinting as hard as I can. Let's say now I need to sprint for a 200-meter dash. And that's going to take me whatever, right? It's going to take me 30 seconds or something, or a 400-meter dash is going to take me a minute to run, right? And it's hard. I'm sprinting hard and I'm breathing as hard as I can. So I've maxed out my aerobic energy system and I've used up all my ATP in the reservoir and I've converted as much of that as I can from creatine back into ATP and I don't have any more. I still need energy from somewhere else because I'm out of energy. And we see this in the Olympics. People are running the 400-meter dash and they don't get 200, 250 meters in and just fall over and they're like a narcoleptic goat and they're laying on the ground. It doesn't happen, right? They keep running. So how does that happen? Well, that's when we use the glycolytic system, glycolysis, which we can just play the sounds like game. Glycolysis sounds like glycogen, sounds like glucose. Glucose is sugar. It burns primarily sugars or carbohydrates in your system. And the thing about glycolysis is it is moderate power and moderate duration. So let me take a second and remind. Aerobic energy system, low power, long duration. Glycolytic system, moderate power, moderate duration. The ATP creatine phosphate system or the phosphagen system is high power, very short duration. This is how our body uses different energy systems.
I would describe it as aerobic is long and boring.
Yep.
And then glycolytic is really uncomfortable and it better be uncomfortable. Super sucky when you want it to end. And then the phosphagen is so fast and fun that you're done before it gets hard.
That's right. It's vertical jumps. It's power cleans. It's 40-meter dashes. It's that kind of stuff. That's exactly right. Now, what is important to understand is that your body doesn't use one of these energy systems at a time.
Yeah, it's not like a car where you're just like
a
switching
switch.
gears.
That's right. Yeah. It's like, oh, we've used up the aerobic, turn off aerobic, turn on the... It doesn't use that at all. As a matter of fact, its default is aerobic. Because the aerobic system is the simplest, it's the most efficient, You breathe oxygen in, you breathe CO2 out. It doesn't make you sore. There's not any sort of weird waste products. There's none of that. There's no lactate buildup or anything like that, right? It works great, but it can only provide so much energy. And when you need more energy, it's going to continue to max out. For example, let's say I did 3 power cleans, 3 decently heavy power cleans every minute on the minute for 10 minutes, right? So I do 3 power cleans. It takes like 15 seconds, maybe something like that. I rest for 45 seconds. Then I do 3 more power cleans, right? So I'm going to be breathing really heavy. I'm still going to use my aerobic system, but I'm really going to be using that phosphagen creatine system a lot more, right? So I'm going to use both. At the point that I have to get into sucky, right? Like Fran, like for anybody that's ever done Fran, where you're just like, oh my God, right? It's, what is it? 21-15-9 of, is it clean?
Pull-ups and thrusters.
Pull-ups and thrust. Yeah, I was like clean and press. What do they call that? Yeah, so pull-ups and thrusters. And you get about 2.5, 3 minutes in, and you're like, this is awful.
Which is like, that's how quickly Jillian did it back in the days when she was.
I know. Yeah, like 2:45 or something.
And like the whole CrossFit empire was like, who is this Jillian? We must find her.
Because she crushed it. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I would say Jillian is one of these people who was blessed with incredible genetics for cardiovascular conditioning, but also is one of the mentally toughest people I've ever met.
God,
and when
amazing.
you combine those two together, she just doesn't have the governor in her brain that says, you should stop now. She just goes as hard as she possibly
can. Her brain
can.
says, how about one more? How about one more a little faster?
That's exactly what she says.
Yep.
I can just do one more rep, right? I can do one. And then she does it. And then she goes, I can do one. So our different cardiovascular systems that we utilize is that high power output phosphagen system, the moderate glycolytic system, which primarily uses sugars, and the low power output, but very long duration aerobic system. Now, here's the thing. When we train cardio, quote unquote cardio, if we just do the aerobic energy system, so like I walk fast, like I did with my wife, I am actually not training that phosphagen or the glycolytic system hardly at all. They're being used a little bit, but like very, very, very low. And so it doesn't actually train the phosphagen system. It'd be like this. It would be like if all I did was go into the gym and I did sets of 20, it wouldn't really improve my 1 rep max.
Really light, super doable. Yeah.
That's exactly right. However, if I train the sucky one, like high intensity interval training where I'm doing like, 10 or 15 hard seconds of sprints, whether that's on, a bike, like an echo bike or a prowler push or a rower or hill sprints or whatever. And I do like 10 or 15, 20 seconds as hard as I can. And then 40, 45 seconds, a minute, 90 seconds, something like that of rest. I am actually maxing out all 3 of those energy systems with high intensity interval training. So I'm actually training all 3. So it's not a one-way street. When I choose to do the cardio that sucks, is in the suck, it makes all 3 better, right? And makes all 3 more efficient, which is very, very important. And it's really important for things like conditioning for performance. When I wanted to condition for performance for like strongman's a perfect example. If I'm going to do a tire flip, think about flipping an 800-pound tire for 100 feet. That's probably 15 flips. High power output, boom. And then your heart rate starts going. And then I got to get down and flip it again. Boom, number 2. By the time I get to like flip 5 or 6, I am what feels like out of energy.
Yeah, totally.
My body's digging deep for that extra energy for that. I often describe it as the aerobic system is like a faucet, a water faucet that's dripping into a reservoir, into a sink. And the glycolytic system is like a fire hydrant that is hammering energy in the system. But it's short in duration or relatively short in duration because there's enough things that occur as waste product is not the right word. This is one that the physiologist would be like, don't say waste product. But there are things that are sort of given off by the glycolytic system that make it very uncomfortable, right? Some of that is lactate, hydrogen ions, pyruvate, those things kind of get cycled back through the Krebs cycle. We don't even have to understand those at detail. It just goes like, if you've ever sprinted as hard as you can for as long as you can, after 100 yards, 150, 200 yards, everything starts to burn. Like your legs burn, your heart burns, your lungs burn, and you can't keep up the same output.
Yeah, you can't, your muscles just won't contract anymore.
They just won't do it, right? And so if I'm training for performance and energy systems efficiency, the best bang for my buck is high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
And that will train all three for efficiency, which is great for performance. One of the things that I've said in the past that I still stand by very, very strongly is that if you are not competing in a sport specifically, then, and you're doing that high intensity interval training for general life conditioning for health improvement, then the choice of exercise that you use for the high intensity interval training should be low skill and low impact.
What's an example of that?
Well, an example of that would be like an echo bike, because you're not pounding anything. Anybody can get on an echo or an Airdyne or any of those kind of bikes. Anybody can get on it and immediately know how to ride an exercise bike. A rower, a C2 rower is a pretty good one. Takes a little more skill to learn, but you can learn the skill on a C2 rower in about a minute, 2 minutes if somebody's like teaching you how to do it. No impact, right? Pushing a prowler is a great one.
Ooh,
Swimming really hard is excellent, right? What about you? You got some other ones like that? It's like, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
Really
prowler,
low impact.
But it's like, the low impact is that you're not banging your foot into the ground.
That's right.
Yeah.
Low impact on your hips, your knees, your ankles, etc. Right? And low skill. Like, what I don't want to do is I don't want to sprint down the street, because that is very high impact. And I would argue nobody knows how to actually sprint correctly, and they end up getting shin splints. They have all sorts of problems, right? But it's also not 30 snatches for time.
Yes.
Or 30 thrusters or clean and jerks for time, because that's a very high skill. And I would argue often a high impact movement, right? A very tired snatch is a good way to break your neck, is a good way to drop a barbell on your neck. And it's happened before. And so if the goal is just to get generally as efficient as we can at energy systems training, the best way to do that is with high intensity interval training. Now, if that's the case, is there a need for, should we do low intensity aerobic work? And the answer is yes, we should, because low intensity aerobic has what appears to be the best longevity return on investment. So being able to improve cardiovascular fitness, respiratory over a 10, 15, 30, 45-minute period, and doing that routinely several times a week will often lead to some of the best return on investment from a cardiovascular / respiratory system, right? So it won't necessarily make the other energy systems, it definitely won't make the other energy systems more efficient, but it is good bang for our buck on improving general health metrics, improving triglycerides and resting heart rate and your blood lipid profile and blood sugar maintenance, making sure that your blood sugar is in check and it's not bouncing up and down and all over the place. That sort of training, or even you could call it exercise, is very, very good and very, very healthy, and detracts almost not at all from the strength training.
And it's so doable. You can just walk out your door and go on a walk, and you're doing it.
You definitely can in Orange County where you live.
Yeah,
it's going to be 65 today in mid-February in Missouri. And so we went on a walk, but if it's -10, then that sucks, right? So if you're, Father Floater up in Minnesota, like, well, it's not very fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where you've got to get, the Echo bike or something to do those on the. But yes, we were actually talking this morning on our walk. I feel like after Valentine's was last night. This is when we're recording this, is the 15th. I'm like, okay, it's springtime.
Yeah.
Valentine's is like the last holiday. And I'm like, now you start thinking about like, oh man, we've almost made it through the winter. In 2 weeks, it's March. March is spring. We can go out, like Rachel and I like to play tennis. When I say play tennis, I mean we volley the ball back and forth
around on the
as many times as we possibly can. Like, we're not actually trying to win anything.
Great.
And we just do it for like low aerobic cardio, right? We walk around our neighborhood. We enjoy walking around our neighborhood. We have conversations every morning walking around the neighborhood about what we're going to do for today. When's your podcast? Podcast is at 10 a.m. I got a couple client calls at this time. We have that. Those are very enjoyable. They are, the CrossFit world calls them recovery sessions.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true, because you're still utilizing a fair amount of energy, but you feel pretty good doing it. You get done and you're like, I feel great.
I think it's so great mentally too.
Me too.
It's like movement meditation, where you get to do something really repetitive that you don't, like you said, you don't have to think about it. And
you don't have to think about it.
It's like a great way to think and process thoughts and be outside if you can get some vitamin D, like natural lighting and breathe fresh air.
That's right.
Like if you're grumpy, go on a walk.
Yeah, especially when you live in those areas where you would have seasonal affective disorder. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like inside all the time. We had a big snow 2 weeks ago. I had gone to church on Sunday morning, and then we went to, it was Rachel's birthday on the 5th of February, which was the following Saturday, and we were going over to her parents' house for dinner for her birthday. And I was like, when was the last time I left the house? And I was like,
Ooh,
it
yeah.
was church last Sunday. I literally had not left my home.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
we had walked a little bit, and I'd shoveled snow, which was, you're talking about some hard cardio.
Yeah.
You're talking about glycolytic. That
That's
stuff
like
sucks.
iconic.
But I mean, I had not been in an automobile. I had not left my house in 6 days.
Yeah.
And so when you're like that in the wintertime, like, yes, getting outside,
Yeah.
getting a walk in the sunshine, going out and playing some tennis, playing some, like, whatever that is, those are great things that you can do. And they are. If you can't prove that they're restorative, certainly they feel that way. And I think there is some benefit in doing the thing that, like, it feels good. I feel better when it's over. I feel like I've done something. It, like you said, it's meditative. I don't have to think about walking.
Yeah.
I have to think about doing power cleans.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about form the whole time I'm doing that, right?
And you probably aren't in front of a screen. Like if you're out walking, unless you're staring at your phone, you're getting a break from screen time.
That's right. I don't take my phone on my walks. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite things is when I'm on my walk and I get about, 75 yards from the house, and the little thing comes up on my Apple Watch that says, well, we're no longer connected to your phone. Yes. I'm like, perfect. This is what we want. Right. So now I can't get any text on my watch either. Right. So yeah, so that's okay. So that's the energy system. So we've gone through why we would want to do cardio, right? You do cardio for cardiovascular fitness, health improvement markers. You could do it for performance improvements, and you can do it for calorie expenditure. And there is some value. Let me be clear. One of the things we do is one of the strategies that we'll use, that Jillian will use, our nutrition team will use, just like strategies like drinking more water or eating more fiber or reducing, high caloric load, whatever, or less alcohol. One of those strategies can be, let's do an extra 10-minute walk every day.
Yeah.
Let's do an extra 15.
Great habit.
And that's a perfectly good strategy that would be similar in impact to, let's go from 2 alcoholic drinks a day to 1 alcoholic drink a day, or to 5, whatever. That's one strategy.
Something that I'll do with nutrition coaching or nutrition advice is, especially for someone who's a snacker, I'm including myself in that, definitely a big time snacker, is start creating more habits that aren't revolved around food. And one of those is walking. So if you're like, whenever I work, I snack. And whenever I watch TV, I snack. And whenever I do XYZ, I snack. Like now you are having 30 minutes where you're not thinking about it.
That's right.
You're creating this big new time in your day where it's not about food, and you can start to really learn what it feels like to be okay in that zone.
Right. We do that all the time, especially when I'm clearly not hungry, right? It's a little different. If you're like, I'm really hungry and I want to eat. But if you're like, I want a snack, but I'm not hungry, a walk around the neighborhood is a great alternative for that. So we can improve performance. We can definitely improve efficiency of cardiovascular fitness and training all 3 of those energy systems. And we can have a little higher calorie expenditure. All 3 things are really, really good. The takeaway, the take home, I think, for how do we put this in our weekly schedule, I think is the way I'd like to tie the podcast up this week. I'll tell you how I do mine. And then I know yours is a little different because of especially the BJJ and stuff that you do. So for me, I train with weights, strength train 4 days a week on average. Sometimes I'll do some extra little accessory. So like upper body accessories, some arms or some abs or something like that on some extra. But for the most part, I have 2 upper body days and 2 lower body days. On my upper body days, at the end of my main lifts, which usually are my press movements like press, bench press, and some usually relatively heavy back movement like a row or something, at the end, I'll put some basic upper body accessory movements in, and I'll do those circuit style to get some additional conditioning in. So I'll do like chins and dips and curls, right? Or rolling dumbbell extensions and lat pull downs and curls, something like that. And I'll do that on upper body days. On lower body days, I may do something similar. I've got the advantage of I have a lot of lower body accessory movements as well, like a glute ham raise, reverse hyper, an echo bike, a prowler, a leg extension, leg curl. I can do the same thing there, but a lot of times I'll just hammer some sort of relatively high intensity interval training cardio, whether that is a rower or an echo bike, or whether I'm going 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off on the accessory movements, I will put those at the end of my strength training sessions is what I'll do. So I'll strength train, and then I spend no more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes max on high intensity interval training at the end of my workouts. Super quick.
Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to make everything more efficient. And then the way I get my volume in of cardio is with walks with my wife. We take walks all the time, at least once a day, often multiple times a day. Once the weather gets nicer, especially in the spring and the fall, 2 times a day, 3 times a day, 10-minute, 15-minute. Our average walk is 15 minutes.
Nice.
We go 1 mile. It's almost a perfect mile loop around our neighborhood in 15 minutes. It's a nice quick pace for a walk. And we love it.
That's
so
great.
that's how we get ours in. And I feel better with that. And when I do that and I track my health metrics, everything gets better. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm more healthy, but my resting heart rate goes down, my blood pressure goes down, my blood glucose goes down. All of it my sleep gets better, my deep sleep, all that. So that's how I do mine. How do you do yours?
Well, I'm in a little interesting zone right now where my training and BJJ is pretty on hold. So before that, I would do jujitsu like 4 times a week. And that was my cardio. If I wanted to train cardio more for jujitsu, I would go to another jujitsu class because it was the most realistic. If I had access to an echo bike, I would probably do an echo bike because that gets me as uncomfortable as I would be in jujitsu as quickly. That's all about being in that place of discomfort, not being sure if you're going to get enough oxygen, and staying calm. And I think that the echo bike is really helpful for that. So I would do lift for 3 or 4 days a week and then jujitsu 4 times a week. And that was like perfect. And then
you typically alternate those on different days.
It would be
typically, right? Or sometimes
2 of those days it would be both. And the other days I would have 1 day off. So like Monday through Saturday, I have at least 1 a day. And then Sunday was totally off. And then lately I'm going through some back stuff, but I'm still doing a crap load of work. So I'm doing like a lot of machine stuff, and there's a prowler at the gym that I go to. So I've been doing a prowler now, and that gets that. I don't feel like I need to do conditioning, but it scratches that discomfort itch. And it's a good way to push a heavy prowler. It's a great way to like get some leg strength training in when your back is a little on the fritz. And I've also started doing...
You push a heavy.
Yeah.
You load it up heavy if you want to.
It's not a sprint prowler.
Yeah.
It's the slow death prowler. And then I've also been doing really long hikes, like 4 to almost 9 miles once a week. So
again, super enjoyable, right?
So there's been a nice diversity, and I walk my dog, so we'll get in several miles during the week too. So there's definitely a nice range of things. But yeah, I do like the conditioning of jiu-jitsu. That was the most impactful conditioning I've ever done.
Well, I think that's another really good point, is that cardio should be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Whatever you use, whatever you decide to do, that doesn't mean that there aren't times where it sucks, right? Like when I do high intensity interval training, well, let me give you an example. I wrote the article on the prowler. I hate the prowler.
So uncomfortable.
I've done it for years, and I don't ever want to do a prowler again. I've got a prowler. I don't do it. I would much rather have the same level of suck running circuits on a glute ham raise, a reverse hyper, the echo bike. Like even the echo bike, I'd rather do the echo bike than a prowler because I hate it, right? And so, so that's kind of it for me. I hate swimming at high. I love to swim. We've got a pool here. Dude, that sucks.
Incredibly difficult.
Swimming hard
Swimming is just like,
I'm like, I'm going to drown.
I really want to breathe, and yet I can't because my dumb face is in the water.
I'm surrounded by water. And so, it sucks. So you want to find something that's enjoyable. The other thing that we haven't pointed out that I think is really important as well is that strength training as a physical attribute takes years to build, to get strong. It takes a long time to get strong. It takes a long time to lose it. You cannot train. You can go on vacation for 2 weeks, come back, and your strength didn't drop by 50%. Energy system efficiency is the opposite. It's quickly gained and quickly lost. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't take a long amount of time to really build a true aerobic base. If you were going to have an aerobic base at the level of being able to like hike in the mountains in low oxygen scenario for like 4 or 5 miles, or to run a half marathon, like that requires an oxygen base level that's going to take a lot of time to build. But as far as like general efficiency of, if you're willing to dive into the suck 3-4 times a week, certainly at least 2 times a week, within 3-4 weeks, you will be very surprised at how much more, quote unquote, in shape you are, you feel, those metrics come back.
Yeah.
But you can then stop. One of the things I think is important for you doing what you're doing right now in not being able to train BJJ very much is it's going to keep your energy system efficiency from detraining, from declining. So by going in and doing the prowler, by doing some of the stuff that you're doing, the long hikes as well, you're going to keep that level of cardiovascular fitness at least at baseline at a pretty solid point so that when you're able to go back to BJJ, you're not like, oh my God, I'm getting crushed because of the conditioning.
Definitely
right?
still feel that way.
For sure, but it'll come back a lot faster.
No, for sure,
it.
without a doubt, yeah.
That's why we condition, right? So the best way to do it, I think, for almost everybody is a combination of a couple hit sessions a week, maybe 2 to 3 hit sessions a week, and then as many restorative, long, slow duration walks as you want to do, right? Don't become, we're not telling you to become exercise bulimic. There are people out there that get up every day and they run or jog, whatever, 6 miles every morning, all the time. That's not what we're talking about. That's not restorative at all. Rather than eating laxatives or making yourself sick or starving yourself to death, you're creating a tremendous amount of energy expenditure by running 6 miles a day to try to create that caloric deficit. That's not healthy. That's not what we're talking about. But to walk around the neighborhood, to walk on the beach like you do, to do those things that are like really, really restorative for both the body and mind and soul, I think doing those nearly every day is great. Yeah. Doing them 2-3 times a week is great as well. And then a couple higher intensity sessions in the suck every week get you right where you want to be. And when you stick with low skill, low impact, it will not take away very, very little from the strength training that we're doing so we can continue to add weight to the bar.
Fun.
And that's why we do cardio. There you go. So now you know all these cardio, energy systems, the phosphagen, glycolytic, and aerobic systems, and conditioning. There'll be a test after the show. You can definitions of all those things. It's been another episode of the Barbell Logic podcast. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of this and it helped make some sense of like why we do cardio and how it works. And so if you did, you got value. One, you can share it with a friend or family member that we would always love to bring more people into the fold and help educate them on the need to experience strength and how we make our lives better. We would also love a 5-star review. They help us tremendously on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And that's it for the Barbell Logic podcast. Nikki Sims and Matt Reynolds, and we'll catch you next Tuesday.
See you next time. Yay.
See you then.